The theme of my video project is about me, my life, and my education and what led me to choose the profession that I am choosing. And my topic is me being interested in trauma counseling. Initially, I wanted to film my video at the school, but because of the virus, it made it a little difficult, so I'll probably end up filming at my house. And I wanted to include clips from the past year and maybe some photos just to give a visual of what I'll be talking about. And I'll probably do some B-roll so you'll get visuals while I'm talking. And I will also be including some research that I found on the topics of trauma. So just because this is my rough draft, I will be reading from the script that I wrote for my final project. It'll be changed up a little bit and more official and more final once that time comes, but I just wrote out what I'll be generally saying during my final video. My name is Natani and I'm 21 years old, and I grew up in Surprise, Arizona my entire life. When I was younger, I had trouble making friends because I did gymnastics from the time I was around 3 to 12, and I spent most of my childhood at the gym. And then I ended up quitting so I could focus on school, and it became very expensive for my parents to afford. And once I was able to focus on school, I was able to make more friends. And then once I reached high school, I had a ton of friends, and life was easy. Life is always easy in high school. You don't have much to worry about. And when I was in high school, I was able to take my first psychology class. And after that, I fell in love with psychology and the study of it. And going through high school, I had a lot of friends that came from not so great families and went through a lot of trauma in their life, and they would always confide in me and tell me that I give good advice. And a lot of people always tell me they feel comfortable talking to me, and I just look like a nice person to talk to, so it'd make it easier for them to talk to me. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a counselor. And then I graduated high school and of course went to college to major in psychology. My education experiences have shaped me because ever since going to college, I started to love school and actually put time into my education. When I was in high school, I did not take it seriously when it came to my education. I was just planning on graduating rather than actually taking the time to get good grades and plan on going to a really good college and, doing the usual thing that people do. And once I got to college, I was able to learn, and I actually wanted to focus on that subject to thrive in school, and I wanted to get good grades and have a good GPA and actually know what I'm talking about so I'm good at my job later on in life. And I actually took the time to do my work and study and actually learn something in school. My teachers also helped shape me in education because I was able to build a relationship with them and have someone to look up to when it was relating to my major. And I have learned about a bunch of different careers that I could do in psychology, and I am a very indecisive person. Therefore, I was constantly changing what I want to do with my career and my major. But the classes that made me change my mind were the addictions class that I took with Dr. Sherlin and marriage and family with Dr. Thompson. And this made me torn between working with addiction substances or marriage and family or anything that had to do with trauma in that sense. So I'm still torn on what I want to do, and I know that's normal, but I just want to be focused on one thing. But I just know in general I want it to work around trauma and the trauma that people have to face in their lives. I will take this knowledge and put it into the world with being a counselor because counselors are very, very, very important, and they help people get through their toughest times. And I feel like even without my education, I learned how to talk to people and take care of them through the experiences I've had and what I've had to face. And to me, life experiences are just as important as the education you learn. And being a counselor is so important to me because I want to make a difference in the world. That's what counselors do. People focus more on medical professionals when it comes to helping people and saving their lives. And of course, they're important people too, but so are counselors and everything that they do. And I also want to be able to be that person that makes a difference in somebody's life, and be that person that they'll never forget because they were able to help them through what they were going through. In my final video, I'm also going to talk about the type of trauma counseling I would like to do and the type of practices that I would do in counseling as well. The first article I'll be using for my final project is the use of mindfulness in trauma counseling. And this article just talks about using mindfulness in trauma counseling and the fact that it gives the client experiencing trauma a sense of self-control and connection. And it also helps reduce anxiety and depression as well. And the next article I'll be using is feminism in counseling. And this article basically just talks about bringing feminism into counseling, which I feel is a great idea because there's a lot of issues that women face that are career related, and I feel like these problems aren't talked about enough. And the next article I'll be using is trauma counseling when it comes to rape victims, and this article just talks about how to counsel somebody that has been through something as traumatic as that. Next article I'll be talking about is trauma in the family, and this article basically talks about how trauma affects the family if one person is going through it, and it could mess up the family dynamic. The next article is shared trauma in counseling, and this article just talks about shared trauma, and it explains that even though the client is going through something, the counselor may be going through something as well, and they could relate to each other better that way. The next article is counseling ethics and the challenges and responsibilities that counselors have to take care of, and this article talks about the ethics of counseling. And I found this one interesting because I feel like there's a lot that some people don't know that they have to do when being a counselor, and sometimes they end up breaking that barrier, which is not good. This article I found interesting because it is called Child Sexual Abuse Survivors Undergoing Cancer Treatment, a Case for Trauma-Informed Integrated Care. And this article talks about child sexual abuse survivors that had to undergo cancer treatment, and the victims in restorative environments with more conflicting childhood experiences like sexual abuse show decreased treatment adherence and more relational struggles with providers, and that added to them having bad outcomes with their health. So I found this article just very interesting. And the next one was Dilemmas in School Counseling Services, which I also found interesting because it just discusses the dilemmas in school counseling. And this was interesting to me because I feel like school counseling is very important and needed, so I wanted to know what the dilemmas were. The next article was Identifying and Treating Race-Based Trauma in Counseling, and this one was just a bit off topic, but I did find interesting because racism is very much alive to this day and often causes psychological problems for the victim involved, and people are hateful and are taught racism from an early age, and being racist and hateful towards somebody is still adding trauma into their life because it could end up being dangerous and violent. And the next article is Trauma Counseling and Interventions, and the author of this article talks about the historical knowledge behind trauma counseling, and I find it important because it's what I'm interested in. This research that I found will go into my final project, and that will go under the knowledge that I learned and how I'm going to take this into the real world, so it'll all tie in together.